Welcome to CivilNet. My guest today here in Yerevan in the studio is Mr. Berge Setrakian, who is president of the Armenian General Benevolent Union, whose work in the diaspora for a century and here in Armenia for these 2 decades of independence has been consistent in many, many fields, and most notably probably the American University of Armenia, which has now moved on to being not just a graduate institution but also an undergraduate institution. Berge, welcome to CivilNet. We're not going to talk about all of that. Instead, I want to talk with you about the global issues that face diaspora in Armenia, because the AGBU obviously faces those issues in not just in its activities and programs, but more importantly in making the decisions it needs to make about what direction to take, I assume.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. I mean, as a matter of fact, in the life of institutions, whether it's AGBU or any other organization, Armenian or non-Armenian, you have always to evolve with the evolution of society. And as you know better than me, society is evolving at such a fast speed that we are not being able to catch up. As a matter of fact, people talk about the turmoil today in the world and that there is a political vacuum worldwide, there is an economic crisis.
And Armenia-wide and diaspora-wide.
And at the same time, we don't realize that I think that technology has moved so fast that neither the anthropologists, nor the sociologists, nor the parliaments, nor the legislative bodies are being able to catch up. We're coming to the Armenian world, obviously with the independence of Armenia, a new reality emerged, but at the same time, the so-called diaspora also changed completely. Unfortunately, with the event in the Middle East and the last one that we are living now in Syria, the role of the Middle Eastern diaspora is doomed to some dark days. I hope that we'll see the end of the tunnel soon, but for the time being, we are not very optimistic there.
Let's try to define diaspora. There are geographic issues, there are generational issues. Who's the diaspora?
You know, I always think about that issue. Like if I go back in memory, 30, 40 years ago, we used to have one diaspora. It used to be the generation of the survivors of genocide, which went and spread all around the world. And as AGBU, it was quite an interesting experience. Every time I used to visit in the 80s or in the 70s, let's say South America or Canada or the Middle East, there was a link. Like in Buenos Aires, I used to meet the schoolmate of my grandmother from Iskenderun, and my grandmother. But
like that.
What united the diaspora, I believe, was a nostalgia of the old country. And Armenia, being under a communist regime, practically closed. So the Armenian world was divided between these two realities.
That was 40 years ago.
Yeah. Now we have two types of diasporas, I believe. One is the geographical, obviously. We have the Western diaspora, which is more centralized in the United States, North America, and in France. And with the new communities, with the wave of immigration, like in Germany, in Spain, where we have about 45,000 Armenians now, in Amsterdam, and in many other places, Poland, and we have the Eastern, which I refer to mainly as Russia and Ukraine, Georgia. So it's, for geographically, it's different. Second, our main concern also, that's why I will come back to why the role of Armenia is so important. We have, with the generational gap, we have different diasporas. Like I define the East Coast of the United States and France as one diaspora, because you have to deal with a majority of third generation. While Canada and Los Angeles, it's another type of a diaspora. San Francisco, being closer to Los Angeles, belongs more to the East Coast and France. South America is another diaspora. So it's very difficult, and there is no more this close link. That's why organizations like ours, which are multinational, we try to bring together the young people through various events, whether cultural, athletic, musical, or any other means, just to create the bonds so that we maintain a certain unity of the diaspora.
The AGBU has put a lot of energy in this last couple of decades into that process of bonds. If before in the diaspora those bonds were of necessity, now you have to create a reason for the younger professional generations to want to bond. Is the purpose that internal diaspora bonding, or is Armenia one of the reasons to encourage that?
I think that there are two elements. One, I think Armenia plays the role of a catalyzer.
Does or should?
Does and should. Does because still it's a young country, it has a benefit of doubt. But unless it becomes a strong, a country which brings pride, because by the end of the day, I believe that for the new generation, the only means for them to remain attached to their roots is if their Armenian heritage brings pride in their daily life. Pride can be mainly through Armenia and through the heroes that we can produce. And I can say that we are going through a dark period of our diasporan
heroes. Yeah. Non-existent.
Aram Khachaturian is not here, we don't have a new one. William Sarayan is not here, we don't have a new one.
On the other hand, in the art scene, there are more Armenians out there than there have ever been.
That's true. Like, that's why, for instance, we have been pushing and developing as much as we can now. We have a whole department of performing arts. We have too many talented Armenians, but now we have to try to push them and give them the opportunity to excel.
On the world stage, yes, not just on
because if they don't excel on the world stage, they're not going to be heroes and models that people are going to look up to.
What about heroes and models that come out of Armenia? We who live here.
From what you say, outside Armenia?
From Armenia. From Armenia. The heroes and models that ought to come from Armenia, that are expected in any country. Yeah. In this case, not just for Armenia's sake, but also for diaspora's sake. We here in Armenia, I think is not unfair to say that the repats in Armenia are convinced that the diaspora is going to be defined by Armenia, diasporans, individuals. Because you are by definition Armenian, therefore you must be of Armenia.
There is absolutely, I think that it has been a blessing to have an independent Armenia. As a matter of fact, I refer to some Middle Eastern old communities, like the Maronites, for instance. They ask me, after the Lebanese war, they are wondering what is the future
for them.
For them, I told them, in my humble opinion, the problem is that you had a country which you thought it is yours, and with the Lebanese war, this myth has been demystified. Your language is Arabic. You belong to a universal language. We have our unique language. You are proud to be in Vatican, to belong to this universal church, the Catholicism. But in this universality, there is a big risk of losing your identity. We have a church which has its weaknesses because it's a small church, but it's a national church. So the Armenia is, as a matter of fact, is the most important link. However, it will not be enough. I mean, I feel how we motivate young people to come to Armenia through the internship program, Musical Armenia, Discover Armenia, and on and on. The first contact is emotional, and they're motivated. The second is discovery. The third is expectation. What this country is going to look like. Unfortunately, the world economic and political situations and the geopolitical situation of Armenia makes it quite difficult to rise and shine for the time being. But I believe that with time, still, our only hope is to create a strong Armenia. That's why we invest so much in Armenia. We invest in Armenia for the sake of diaspora. There is a little bit of selfish interest. Because otherwise in diaspora, we have a big challenge. As we have a whole new generation. I believe that the majority, 70 or 80% of this new diaspora, whether it's in Russia or in the United States, it's a third generation. They all belong, I compare it always to a bottle of water. They are pure, clean. They don't have the baggage of the older diasporan generation.
The institutional.
Yes, and they are independent, they are smart, they are successful, but they all have this Armenian DNA. And we try to cater to this DNA, because if this bottle crashes, then it will be very, very costly, and for the diaspora and for Armenia.
I'm schizophrenic sometimes because I wear two hats. I live in Armenia, clearly from the diaspora. And I sense that the expectations, one of the other, have the distance between the expectations and the reality has increased rather than decreased from both sides. And that is making, it seems to me, for less significant, deep engagement, not more. And that is evident in the way that philanthropy is being done now. If it used to be that philanthropy in the diaspora was through certain major organizations, the AGBU has been fortunate in receiving wills, homes, and the fruits of Armenians' labor in order to do its work. Armenian Relief Society the same way, other organizations, the churches certainly. Now people are kind of creating their own, and as a result doing their own work in Armenia, which perhaps, arguably, obviously, is not as effective as big, significant input. Is philanthropy changing?
You know, I think, again, your question has three different levels. First, in general philanthropy, I believe that philanthropy is changing. Armenians of the diaspora are becoming less and less generous, frankly speaking.
Is it generational or is it economic?
I think that, first of all, the elder generation, the generation of the survivors of the genocide. I give you an example where there was a lady who used to be a manicurist in New York, never got married, and every time she used to go on vacation back to Istanbul for 2 weeks, she used to go to the PSEG, shut off her electricity, the power, and
save the money.
To save money. She never realized that shutting it off and reopening it cost her more. She was living in an old building, 5th floor. She died and she left $2 million to charity. Unfortunately, often the dead are keeping the organizations alive. With the new generation, most probably there is the fact first that they are more integrated in their local society, and they have other means, because the old generation, even though they were successful financially, but psychologically, they didn't have the courage to get out of the Armenian shell and go into the social life outside the community.
No more.
So within the community, they were the leaders, their ego was satisfied, and besides their ego, their emotions were satisfied. Now, no more. Unfortunately, the successful are drifting away from the community. And the leadership of the diaspora is not being able to catch up and cater to the needs of this new generation. And if we continue like this, we are going to be a diaspora without a diasporan. It is very challenging. For instance, I always refer to the experience in the United States, and I wonder, where is the Dokmedjan generation? In 1984, Armenians in the United States, we had a governor, where another very large community, obviously the Jewish community, never had a governor in the United States history. We had 2 congressmen. We had 3 out of the 7 members of the Supreme Court of California. We had the Speaker of the House of Massachusetts. We had the Senate Majority Leader of New Jersey, and in the past we had the California Majority Leader of the House.
This is in the 80s.
Today, we have barely some members of city councils, and we say that we made it. We have to look back in retrospect, what went wrong? In the meanwhile, I remember when I came to the United States in '76, there were very, very few Armenians involved in Armenian community life, for instance, who had joined big law firms. Today in New York, we have 40, 50, 60. Easy. Yeah. Now the income level, maybe we don't have anymore the Alex Manoukian's fortunes and generosity, because fortune is not important as generosity. But we have a high level of income. It's embarrassing and shameful that the entire diaspora couldn't raise a couple of $1 million for the Syrian situation, refugee situation.
But that's not an economic problem.
No, I think there is a less interest, and I think that the leadership is not being able to come across to sensitize people to the issues of Armenia.
It's that interconnection and the awareness of that interconnection that is not just interesting, but I think consequential. If the messages of the diaspora for these 20 years have been, you know, there's an independent Armenia and that's our rallying point, and at the same time, if you lose hope in that independent Armenia because of that difference between expectations and reality, doesn't that affect every other aspect of diaspora engagement?
It is affecting. Let's be candid. Today, the Western diaspora is weaker than what it was 20 years ago. And the issue today, also, the Armenian leadership also, Armenia's leadership, was not able to really catch the problem that dealing with the institutional 100-year history institutions is not the answer to the question. Let's take Armenia Fund. When we started the Armenia Fund, our dream was if 100 million Armenians, 1 million Armenians, each contributes $100, it should make $100 million. I am so disappointed that worldwide we are barely reaching $10 million. What are our neighbors going to think? There is a demystification of the Armenian lobby, of the Armenian power in Washington. It's a fact. God bless the two co-chairs of the Armenian caucus, but it's embarrassing that we are just stuck there. So there is a misconception on both sides. That's why, and Armenia has excellent young talents. We are not creating the opportunity for these young talents to meet the young talents of the diaspora. This is what we need, talents. As I can give you an example. In our scholarship program, the other day, I was reviewing who are the recipients. When I compare the average results, the GPA of the Armenian-born now living abroad and the diasporan, let me tell you, it's almost embarrassing. We're talking about an average of 3.5, 3.6 versus an average of 2.9.
Armenia, ambition, capability, amazing.
We have to promote, we have to let this, as a matter of fact, this is what we're trying to work on. As AGBU, we have reached the conclusion that there are enough organizations which cater to the regular institutional programs, the classical, the concept of AGUMP and everything. Our target is really the bottle of water I referred to earlier. We are leaving the cup of coffee to many other institutions because we have to concentrate on this young generation. I'm not afraid of expatriation, repatriation. These are phenomena which move. As a matter of fact, if we look to globalization today, France has a big wave of immigration now. Lebanon, every country. Obviously, we have it at a higher level, I think for two reasons. First, we have a big diaspora. If you are a Kazakh or an Azeri, what kind of diaspora you have as connections to move. And second, unfortunately, the economic conditions and the blockade and the geopolitical situation of Armenia is not helping very much. So people first, you know, nationalism is good, but comfortable life is also very important.
And the future, hope.
Yeah. And like in Europe, I was mentioning earlier communities in Munich, in Frankfurt, in Madrid. Like about 20 years ago when these young, talented people came, they came without any legal status. They were trying to survive. And AGBU created partnerships with them because AGBU is not interested in self-promotion. There is a question of a global interest. And you see now these young people, they come to these meetings, very well dressed, they're investment bankers, they're lawyers, and now that they are established, they can afford the luxury of thinking about their identity. Because let's not forget also one element. The diaspora, our Armenian diaspora, doesn't have, in general, our communities, in the social, financial profile, we still are largely the lower middle class. We are not yet middle class. And it's a big dilemma. For instance, for schools, the other day I was discussing in Canada, the average income of a household, of an Armenian household, is about 40,000 or maybe 50. Half of it goes to taxes. You remain with 20, 25,000. If you have 2 kids and you want to pay tuition of 6,000, it's $12,000. And in Canada, you know, in cold countries, the cost of living is much more expensive. You have that experience. I said, do we have the right to tell the Armenians, you know, you are a Canadian citizen, you pay your taxes, you are entitled to free education, but you know what? Because you're Armenian now, you have a second tax to pay by sending your kids to Armenian school and deprive yourself and your kids from some of the extra pleasures of life. We have to rethink. For instance, if a school shuts down, people say, oh, they are closing down a school. Like in Greece, we have 60 students in our school. We're on a deficit of $450,000.
This thinking, you know, the AGBU has been in trouble now for about a decade because of the whole Melkonian process and all of the questions that continue to arise. The thinking that you say that we need to do, is it done publicly, and is it done in coordination with the other organizations that we hope are asking the same questions?
Well, first, the Melkonian crisis is for those who are outside. For us, it's not a crisis. It hasn't been a crisis. We believe that was the right decision because, as we said, we evolved. An institution which started in the 20s, obviously, you have to question yourself. As a matter of fact, today we have the same problems. Sorry to take your time, but just let's take schools. Why we had Armenian schools? Because under Ottoman Empire, we were not entitled to access, we didn't have access. When we came to the Middle East, the same constitutions were applied and we needed to keep our identity. We went to Los Angeles. We went to Los Angeles because a couple of teachers from Lebanon went there with their families and they
wanted the same thing.
To start a school. We didn't start schools adapted to the realities. I think that...
And that can be said for so many of our institutions.
We have, in this internet and the Twitter and Facebook, at AGBU now we have a database of 11,000 young professionals. I attended a gathering in New York a couple of months ago, maybe a month ago. 450 people that night. There was so much energy in that room. So much energy. Really, the bright guys. I understand in San Francisco last month we had the same thing. So
is this discussion public? Is there public dialogue, both of the AGBU as well as with the other organizations?
I have a lot of respect for all organizations, but unfortunately, when I became president in 2002, I tried to create a consortium of diasporan organizations and the churches. Unfortunately, it didn't lead too far. There are various reasons maybe, but and Armenia in that respect also failed to be the catalyzer. Because I always look, we are all members of this nation, but the state is the cornerstone of the nation. Every member of the state is a member of the nation, but every member of the nation is not part of the states. So the state maybe also, we are expecting too much to have so many problems.
It's those expectations we're talking about.
We didn't have the maturity in the diaspora to get together. And also, most of us as institutions, let me tell you, we are dépassés. If we don't recognize that reality, if we don't acknowledge the failures, then we are in trouble. That's why less than, in my opinion, less than 5% of the Armenians, whenever we have here meetings of the representatives of the diaspora, all the representatives, including myself, I don't think that we can speak on behalf of more than 5% of the Armenians of the diaspora. We have to get out and reach out to this new diaspora, which wants to be fully integrated and be in a leadership position.
Can't think of a better ending than that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Berge Setrakian, President of the Armenian General Benevolent Union, and thank you for following us on CivilNet.